Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today, listening today, or at whatever point in time you do this. I'm Nikki Ryberg, and I'm super excited to have Kristin Gupta with us today. She is a recruiter in the real world, doing this day in, day out, talking to candidates, talking to hiring managers, talking to companies. And so I asked her if she would be willing to come on and just have a conversation with me about hiring and all of the things. So I met her, meet, if you can call it that, on LinkedIn. I think I was a follow of hers for a long time. And I still remember the post was like, hey, it's my birthday. I want to just start networking with folks. Like, here's my booking link. And I was like, oh, sign me up. So that was a couple of years ago now. And here we are. So, Kristin, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your story of how you got to be a recruiter and what you do today. And then we'll kind of dig in.
Sure, happy to share, Nikki. I love this story actually because it's what I tote to a lot of my candidates, but it also made such a significant impact for me. I was leaving a previous job where I was in campus relations recruitment. I traveled essentially the US. I had 15 states, 875 schools, 125 managers that I was working with in that role. And I was traveling 75% of the time. When I left that role because it was moving to a different state, I reached out to my network, terrified, like shaking in my boots, calling every literal business card. So I had a shoebox, Nikki, full of business cards. And I told myself this job search will be different because the job search I had been on before that, I had looked for 7 to 8 months, and I know some of your clients are in that position where they're on that, what I deem long haul search, and it's really hard on you emotionally and hard on your ego. So I was like, this time I'm going to do it differently, and I'm going to be very proactive. And I'm going to call every single business card that I have in this box, regardless of how well I know them. And I will call them twice or three times, however many times it takes for me to land. And about the seventh or eighth business card in was a guy that I had met about a month ago at a DECA conference. So my boss had asked me to pinch hit for her and be at a board of directors meeting for DECA. And so I'm there with executives from organizations. Like the lady from Spanx was there, the owner of Spanx. That was really cool. The owner of Foot Locker was there. And then this guy who was the VP of sales and marketing for Men's Warehouse was there. And he and I had had cocktails the night before and had a great conversation. He invited me to a dinner that had the president of Foot Locker and the owner of Spanx. And the four of us had really great fish in downtown Chicago, which was awesome. So I called him. I only knew him from that weekend, had never talked to him after, had never met him before. And I was like, Mike, what do you think I should do next? Like, obviously, you liked something about me when we met at this event. I happen to be looking for something now. And he said, Kristin, you impressed me when we met. And I had been thinking actually when we met that you'd make a great executive recruiter. An executive recruiter helped me land in the position that I'm in now. And you share some of those similar characteristics of curiosity and passion that individual did. The next day, I applied to 3 executive recruiter positions. Within a week and a half, I landed at this company, and I've now been here for 13 years.
Wow, good for you. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
A
awesome.
long story, but I really wanted to paint the picture for your listeners that are on
Yeah.
here how valuable networking can be. And it's like he didn't give me a position, he
Yeah.
told me what to go for, which was really helpful.
And that is so true. I think when folks hear networking, they think it's this easy, like, job, like, Bob's going to give me a job. Or
Yes.
I have to have it all figured out before I can even talk to anyone. And it's like, it didn't hurt anything to ask him, like, where do you think I would be happy? You still had the agency to look into that type of job to
Mm-hmm.
decide, like, would I like that or not? And maybe it wouldn't have come across your radar as quickly as it did without asking the question.
I actually think the reason I was hired is because I told that story in the interview.
No kidding.
And what is a good executive recruiter but a great networker?
Yeah, so true. So true. How do
Yeah.
you like recruiting? And what do you see changing in the last few years about it too? Because that's kind of what I'm curious to talk about today is like you said, some job seekers have been going through this for 6-7 months. Some are doing it for the first time in 20 years. And my goodness, it's changed in the 8 years I've been doing this.
I like recruiting. I think my superpower, or one of my superpowers, is as a connector of people, Nikki. So I meet one person and something inside, like trusting my intuition, says, this person needs to know this person. And when I make enough of those connections, magic happens. It's so beautiful to see relationships that I carry just a small component, just a nudge of connecting these two people together blossom into something they may not even remember that I made the initial connection, but I'm not connected to that. I'm connected to knowing I'm making magic happen, right? And so I love that aspect of recruiting when a client calls me and they say, I have this need and I can get it and understand what they're looking for. Because one thing to remember as a candidate, how do recruiters get paid? How do we make money? Right? That's an important component to understand. I make money because my clients hire me or contract with me essentially to fill an open need on their team. And that means I have to put my best candidates forward. It doesn't mean I'm not going to take care of my candidates, even though you're not necessarily paying me to be a career consultant or a coach. Nikki's a great person to work with in that. But I am happy to help and work with my candidates so that if they are the best person, they're showing that they're the best person for that job, right? It is challenging though when you're recruiting in a market like this. And we'll get into that as we dig a little bit deeper into this. Like when you care deeply about people and know what it's like to be on a long haul job search and see a market that looks like this, where nobody's talking about it, but it's somewhat of a downturn. Like, let's be real, it's a downturn. There are more people in this area, especially my area of expertise, that are looking for a job than there are jobs out there. And that makes it hard.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that too. And I'm seeing that companies are taking longer and longer to make decisions. And sometimes I'm not always confident that they're even making decisions. Like I have a hunch some of them are going through this whole process and having to hit the brakes, either due to budget, due to indecision. Is that anything that you're seeing on your end at all? Just from even more so, less your probably clients, but more so even just like the candidates you're working with, are they experiencing that as they're going through the search? Because it's tough out there right now. Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, Nikki, I would say yes. And so, yes, clients are taking longer and dragging their feet a bit because they're seeing maybe what does the market really look like? Do we actually need to make this higher? Or do we need to cut deeper in layoffs? Unfortunately, this is happening with a lot of companies, but also I think in a world that we live in today, unfortunately, there's less personal touch when it comes to recruitment. So I think a lot of candidates also have opportunities on their agenda that they think are moving that are dead, that aren't moving at all. And because they have that, they feel like they've got irons in the fire when their fire is completely cold as well. So they need to take some proactive approach to saying, this is not alive anymore. I really need to go to seek new opportunities as well.
That's such a good point. I think that does happen a lot. What should candidates be doing right now in this more of kind of what I'd call a colder market? What would your suggestions for folks be? I can tell you that like, when they work with me, we work on their branding. We try and get that as, polished as it can be. They're networking, trying to help keep them confident. I feel like saying you need to stay patient and positive. It feels so cliche and so generic, especially coming from like one of the least patient people on the planet. Like I have so much empathy for what they're going through. Like I stay up at night worried, like, gosh, I hope they get this. But what advice do you have for folks? Because if nothing else, it's something they can control, they can work towards it, and hopefully it helps them feel a little less alone, knowing that they're not the only ones going through this.
Is it okay if I give three pieces to this answer?
Please do. Please do.
Okay. So one piece that I've seen a lot in my candidates that I've been coaching and that I've been working with is we kind of want to see the job search as a tennis match, right? Where I serve the ball to you by applying to the position. And then I wait for you to give the ball back to my side of the net in order to take the next stage, right? Like we see it as a back and forth process, but that's not how the job search really works. You have control over what's happening with the positions that you're put forward to. In fact, if you treat it as tennis, you're probably going to miss out on the best opportunities for you. So, one is remember that the ball is often in your court, even when you feel like it's not. When you apply to the position, are you doing follow up? Are you seeing other people that work at that organization asking for informational conversations? Don't call it an interview. Don't say, I want a job at your company. Say, I'm interested in something at your organization. And I'd love to find out more about the culture at your company to see if this is a place I want to work. That takes all the pressure off of that person from giving you the job. And it's not just the hiring manager, although you should have the gumption to reach out to the hiring manager too and have that conversation. So don't think that because I pitched the ball over here, now it comes to me. It's a little bit more like foosball, where if you're really playing foosball well, you can get through some of those defenders as well. Second answer, the job search is a really great gift wrapped in a really ugly package. What I mean by that is sometimes, especially when we're in active job search, we can feel deflated. It can be very difficult. It's especially difficult because it hits our finances, but it also hits our ego. It also hits how we feel about ourselves, which I think is completely separate from ego. There's ego and there's id, right? And it hits how we're able to interact with our family and our community and what we're able to provide and support, not just for our family, but for our community. Like a job is eustress. We feel useful. We feel like we're accomplishing something when we're in a job. So when we're in job search, we lose so much of that. But also when we're working full time in a company, we often get so wrapped up in what we do that we forget that we're a human being too. We forget who we are. And that's why I call it a gift. The job search gives us an opportunity to rediscover who is Nikki, who is Kristin. So if you're not taking some of your job search time to go through that discovery to see, you know what, who am I now? And having some of that time there for you, you're missing something great that you can accomplish as well, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
And then the third thing that I wanted to mention as well is networking has a place, a significant place in job search. It's not the only thing that you should be doing. And networking is far, 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 a far cry away from just attending networking meetings. Right. And I'm sure you talk to a lot of your clients about that. When a lot of people hear networking, they think going into a room of a bunch of strangers that they don't know and breaking into conversations. I'm actually terrible at that kind of networking. I'm much better at one-to-one connections and thinking, who could I introduce Nikki to that would be of value? And then Nikki does the same. That's how I feel networking really works. Introverts are, I think, better at networking than extroverts are.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if you had like a job seeker come in and you were telling them you need to network and they're like, oh, I don't really know how to do that. Like I asked the recruiter on that position to tell me more about it. And I'm like, that's not what I mean by networking. So walk us, and I feel like you did this in the beginning by how you got your current job, but like walk someone through that maybe didn't hear it that time. What does networking look like to you and what should they actually be doing? And should they still apply to roles? Because sometimes I get the folks who just want to talk to people all day. And I'm like,
The extrovert of networking,
unless you want to be
right?
in sales, like you still need to apply. So kind of like, what do you think there? What are your thoughts and what would you tell folks?
So there's typically two direct ways to get into an organization. If that organization is using an external recruiter, say such as myself, and that candidate applies to a job posting, they may miss out on that opportunity because the internal recruiters don't always look throughout the applicants. So do a little bit of research before applying, yes, but in some way you have to apply for that position, right? So if you apply to a position, if you're interested in a role and you do some research on that position, don't just click apply right away and get your resume in and do no legwork prior and use the same resume as you're using for the 50 other applications that you put in. I believe that applying well means 10 to 15 applications a week at max, not 30 to 40 of the same blend resume out to all the positions. Nikki, I posted 6 jobs in the last 2 weeks for HR positions, all on site, all in local Wisconsin-based companies. And of those 6 jobs, I had 120 applicants. As an external recruiter, I'm only interviewing 6 people from
So what
those
made them stand
applications.
out? What made them stand out?
So what makes them stand out? You actually fit for the role that you applied to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's true, but that's the case. So if you're only applying to a position and say that position has 50 applicants and you actually fit that position, you may be one of 2 people that really suit that role. And when I say suit the role, I don't mean you're an HR manager applying to an HR manager position. I mean, I come from pharma, this is a pharma company, or this organization has this type of culture. I'm looking for this type of culture. Like, call it out, really look for those matches beyond a job description, right? If you're willing to relocate for a position, you have to state that on your resume too, because otherwise somebody's not going to call you. You have to state it even on your LinkedIn profile if you're willing to relocate. And don't say I'm willing to relocate anywhere in the US. Nobody believes that, right? I'm willing to relocate to these specific locations. This is where I'm looking for. And then you also need to do what I call legwork. So you apply to the position with a resume that's truly apparent for that role, meaning you rewrote your resume a bit. It could be finding their 5, I call it the 5 keywords that company is looking for, looking at their job description, looking at their website. What do they honor? What do they want to make sure that they're expressing to their clients, to their internal, right? You know something about the company, you adjust your resume to suit. That's going to stand out. Then you also start interviewing other people at that organization. So you look at the company profile. It's so easy on LinkedIn. You go to their company profile and you go people, right? Now you can see everyone that on LinkedIn says they work for this organization. And you look for people that would be peers of yours within the company. And you look for somebody that you would report to. More than likely, if it's a bigger company, it might be a little bit harder to find this information, but you can still find it. And Nikki can help you, I'm sure, with some resources too. But you look for peers, you look for the hiring manager, and you look for recruiters. You send at least 10 people a message. Hey, I'm interested in working for this organization. I just applied to this position. State the position by name, right? And use the name of the company so that they can tell this isn't the same message that you send over and over again. And say, I would love to find out more about the culture to see if it would be a good fit for me. Would you be willing to connect with me for 10 minutes? Ideally, you as a candidate should have a calendar link to make it easier for people to book your time. This language makes a difference as well. Please find a time that works best for you. Instead of, here's a link to my calendar, please find a time that works for my calendar. There's a huge difference between those two, right? If you do that for 10 people, by the way, the first time you might only hear back from 1, you might hear back from none. The second time you do this, you might hear back from 1 or 2. The next time you do it, you might hear back from 1 or 2, but guess what? That's the process to actually being seen and heard, and you can see and make sure this is a good landing for me or it's not.
Yeah.
Because how many times when we're in job search do we unfortunately land well because we need a paycheck or because we need a job?
It's so true. And I call it fact finding because, again, the networking, these people, it's great if they become your biggest cheerleader and advocate and you strike up a connection and they put in a good word for you. But every piece of information you learn in those conversations, you can use in an interview answer, a thank you. You can be sure to like apply it in a strategic way into things. And you can also run the other direction if it's a terrible fit. And that just seems to get lost a lot on folks. And I know that's hard, especially if finances are tough, but beyond the networking, what else do you think folks can do to stand out right now in today's market?
I think a lot of people somewhat fill their time with busy work when they're job seeking. What I mean by busy work, some of the things that I've seen people fall into. Um, is it good to take courses and that type of thing? Yes, but limit them because you're paying out for them as well. And they don't mean as much as you think, right? So you're paying out, you're taking time, which is more valuable than the amount of money you're putting in, right? And the results of taking those courses may or may not help you in landing. Everybody says, oh, it's going to keep my skills sharp or that type of thing. But I think it's just filling your time and not doing the harder things like these LinkedIn networking reach outs when you're applying to positions, like actively networking and reaching out to people and saying, hey, can you meet for coffee? That's hard. It's not easy. It's simple, but not easy, right? So one is avoid time wasters. Second is really think about what you want in something new. Try to write it down on paper and have that be a component of how you interview with a company. Because when you interview well with an organization and you say, I want this job, and here's why I want it. Here's where I see your values, and here's how it aligns with mine. You're more likely to get the job than if you interview saying, I just want a job. So, knowing what you're looking for, doing some of that internal search. Internal work doesn't feel like work sometimes. Well, it's hard. It feels like work here, but it doesn't feel like you're accomplishing anything, right? Like our high achievers that want to see productivity and see like things happen. We want to work on things that are visible. This is invisible, but it helps. Make it visible by writing it in a journal, write it down somewhere, that type of thing. But I think that makes a huge difference. Networking can help give you that too.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
And
asking people you used to work with, what am I good at? What do you think I want? Like, I want to talk about what I'm looking for in something new and help to refine it. I think that helps a lot too.
yeah. And I think that question of like, I don't even know what I don't know. I'm like, well, other people are the perfect place to start with that question.
Don't
To
do it in
think
a
about.
vacuum.
Yes, exactly. And once you know where you're going, your resume, your cover letter, your elevator pitch, like every part of your professional branding comes into play too. One thing I get asked a lot and that I see from the HR lens, and I am curious about this, is if you want to stay in the same industry, the same type of job, like if you're minus non-competes and that kind of stuff, it becomes much easier to like stay in HR in manufacturing. But if suddenly you've been in manufacturing and you want to make the move to healthcare, it could be a lot harder. And what I'm at least finding with my clients is most folks want that change or they just stay where they are and with the devil they know. And making a change becomes hard because it feels like right now, every employer just wants to hire someone doing the exact same thing somewhere else. So what advice do you have for those of us on that? I'm a big fan of networking to hopefully get an advocate to get your way in, learn more about their needs, but sometimes there's, different, stepping roles you need to take to get there. So what would your advice be? Because I'm sure you see this with clients, especially in HR all the time, where it's like, I'm tired of this industry, but I want this other one. And that could be a hard leap to take. Are you finding that companies are more open to that? Am I wrong? Like, what are you seeing?
They would have been more open to it in 2022 when they were desperate to find anyone to fill a seat. This type of market changes that nature. And if it was easy, let's say you moved in 2022 and it was easy to move, it feels vastly different now. It's like whiplash. Is it still possible to do that? Absolutely. It will never go away. But you have to, there's two parts to this story, right? One is how you feel about yourself and whether or not you can do it. Do you truly believe that you can? or do you not? If you truly believe that you can, you come across as confident and able. If you don't, but you're trying to express an image that you do, you come across as cocky or rude sometimes. We've all seen the person that has the false confidence. False confidence, to those of us that are savvy, that have been around for a while, we can see right through it. So, in order to build up to that transition into a different industry or something like that, you have to first believe and understand why you can make that move, why it's helpful for you. Why do you want it? So that self-reflection that we talked about before. Why is this something that's important to you to make this move? It could be a life change. Maybe you had somebody in your life. I'll give me as an example. My mother and father-in-law moved in with us for 2 years, and we cared for them while they were in their last months and weeks and days of life. And it completely changed my perspective on not only the healthcare field, but also we ended up working with funeral directors. I never knew much about that field, right? We ended up working with hospice. I never really knew much about that field. We talked to the people that dropped things off to our house for hospice. We talked to evening care workers. So it completely changed my perspective of how I view fields that I never really touched ever, right? And that might make you think, I would like to go into this field and provide my services or provide my strength. So know your story and why you're interested in that field, and then see what are the cross-functional skills that I have. What are the things that I carry from where I am now that could be beneficial over here? But it's also important to know what are the gaps over here that I help to resolve. Because the reason a company would hire somebody that's coming from a different industry is you know something that they don't. That's the reason they'd hire. So that's the first part, is how you feel about yourself, how you present, what you bring to the table. But then there's the other side of how do they hear you? There are going to be companies that they're like this, and they can only hire somebody with this type of background. Unfortunately, often the first round recruiter has those blinders because they haven't been around long enough to see the perspective that this person's background could be beneficial, because although they don't match all of these boxes, they have some unique characteristics that we could use on this team. It's often only the senior leader or the hiring manager that gets A, Z, C equals, oh, that's actually a really good fit. So only going through the application process and through the recruiter probably won't get you there, which is why, Nikki, you and I talk all about networking, right? Because you want to be heard by the person that would actually see it, that can see how that works. But then also, who do they typically hire? Do they ever hire out of industry at this organization? So looking at the profiles of the people that they hire, again, this, you can't possibly do this by applying to 30 to 40 positions a week. The only way to do this is apply well to a smaller amount of positions and do the legwork as well.
Yeah, I love that. What are you seeing salary and pay wise? Sometimes I'm in this market and finding that candidates are not getting the salaries that they were hoping to, or maybe offered 2 years ago. And they're asking me things like, should I lower my threshold? And my practical answer is, well, if the market's telling us the needle's not moving, then yeah, you need to be open to it. But do you agree, disagree? And I mean, not to make it like a debate, but it's just, I don't know. What are your thoughts on what you're seeing there? Because I'm not seeing the negotiating power we had a couple of years ago.
One of my partners, who's an excellent recruiter, has had so many deals fall apart because of this question this year. Because candidates' expectations are here, and clients' ability and their expectations are here. And if these two can't come together, I had an unfortunate circumstance at the beginning of the year where I had a candidate making $90,000 a year. And the client originally wanted to set the position up from 70 to 80,000. I told them when she was first interviewing, she's at 90. She'd ideally need 90 for this position. Do you still want to interview her? So upfront expectations are often helpful. I would love for Wisconsin to move to transparency and pay so we know what a company is looking for up front. and we have a little bit more transparency there, I just think it'll make all of our worlds a little easier. We're not there yet. Maybe we will be, but I think being open, not trying to hide what you're looking for, keeping it in a box, that's not helpful for you. It's not helpful for them. Knowing what you're looking for and being upfront about it, I think it's more helpful than not. But this candidate ended up getting an offer for 90,000 and she asked for 95 and they rescinded the offer. Not even came back and said, no, we can't do 95. Came back and said, if you're not willing to do it at 90, we're going to offer our second.
I'm glad you shared that because I feel like you can go on LinkedIn, and I detest my industry because there are folks out there who are like,
oh, there's so many people that are saying, I'm going to get you $20,000 more.
If you buy my program, you're guaranteed to do this. Or if you work with me, I guarantee you're going to figure out what your career clarity is. And you need to pay $5,000 and all of your answers are solved. And I have rescinded offers back in the day in HR. I've heard it happen to other people. So I'm glad to keep spreading that message that it can happen, because from the employer's perspective, if they've been upfront and it seems that out of line, like somebody else will be very happy at that amount. And it's very nerve-wracking to hire someone knowing like they think they're being underpaid.
We used to unfortunately live in a market, Nikki, where companies would offer low and candidates would
yeah,
have to like go back and forth, right?
sure.
Like, it was almost that,
Like a house.
I don't want to pick on baby boomers, but it was almost this concept that I'm going to offer you 70, you're going to come back and you're going to say you need 80, and we're going to meet in the middle at 75. Like that was almost like the culture of job offers
Yeah,
at a certain point, right? This was not like recent, it was years ago that this happened, but so much exists from then still in play today that I think candidates feel like if I don't negotiate, then am I speaking for myself? Like,
right.
am I advocating for myself in this organization? We've now reached a stage where I think a lot of companies are overwhelmed by what 2021 and 2022 looked like. They had to offer way more than what they would have ideally wanted to. They had very challenging times internally on their teams because their internal people were making 20 to 30% less than the new people that they were bringing in, which caused a lot of issues. In fact, I think it partially caused what we're going through right now is that talent boom or the talent deflation, which created a hiring boom and created all of these inflated salaries that then also like some people thought of this, but nobody was listening, right? And you couldn't hire unless you offered these numbers to people. So even if people were listening, they were like, but this is what I have to do. I have to offer 100K for a 70K position. I have to offer 70,000 for new grads. Like it's a requirement right now for me to do that because otherwise I won't get any talent and I'll lose everybody. But then their 70K new grad of today is sitting next to the 2-year person that's making 60. And then that 2-year person is like, now I need to go find something new. And they're looking for 100, right? And that created this inflation of salaries, but also companies couldn't keep up with that, which created this, oh my God moment that we're facing now. Like what my CEO calls this is, oh shoot, Nikki, I can't remember the word, a restabling. That's not the word that she uses, but it's like we're settling back to where we should be at this stage versus what was created of 2021 and 2022.
And so I don't want anyone listening to think you can never negotiate, because that's certainly
Correct.
Kristen and I's like scare tactic of like every offer will be rescinded. I'm a big fan of like know the market values, know how to pick up on the cues, like appropriate questions like, is this negotiable? What tips would you have for folks there? Because I certainly don't want to scare anyone away, but I'm definitely seeing that like if they're being pretty upfront and it ends at 90, you coming in and asking for 115 probably isn't going to go over well. But
Yeah.
what do you have any other
No,
for folks just to also help advocate for themselves too.
Yeah. You know who really knows the market value is recruiters. And you know who
Yes.
gets stepped on all the time is recruiters.
Yeah.
You can make recruiters your friend, or you can make recruiters your frenemy, let's call it. And it's all how you treat them in the process. I think a lot of people underutilize the recruiters that they partner with because, and unfortunately, there are a lot of not great recruiters out there too. Let's be real. Okay. But if you meet with a recruiter, let's say they post a position and then you have an interview with them and they walk through the steps of the role and it doesn't end up being a good fit, which unfortunately happens more often than it doesn't. So they post a position, they're going to interview hopefully more than 6 out of 120. But they're going to interview a number of candidates for that position. They can only hire one. So there's less people that they're going to hire than that they're not going to hire. Don't be so pissed off or disappointed that you treat that recruiter poorly. Because what if 2 weeks after you have that conversation with that recruiter, you get an offer from another company that you were in independently with? You have no resources to find out what that position should pay. Well, maybe you do. If you treated that recruiter well, you could call them and say, hey, Kristin, I know you didn't put me forward to this, but I just interviewed with this company. I'm getting an offer. What do you think this company should pay? Because they're asking me what I'm looking for, or they're offering this and it feels low. What do you think? Typically, we'll know.
Yeah.
But if you treat us poorly, we're not going to take the time of day
Right.
to take that time to talk to you.
I love that. And you mentioned in the beginning, like you guys get paid because the company pays for you. And sometimes my clients come to me and they're frustrated that they're not
You
getting
feel like we're working
handheld
for
by
you.
their recruiters. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but that's not what they're paid for. Like that's what people like me are here for. And same with internal recruiters. Like they really can't tell you why you didn't get the job. They have to protect the company from lawsuits, from all sorts of things. And they have other things to do in their daily job. So I feel like there's so much we could talk about, but I know we're getting like so over the time. Is there any other passing messages that you want candidates to know right now? And then also more importantly, how can folks find you and what do you specialize in and what kinds of connections are good for you to have? Because I'm always here for the networking and I want to make sure people know how to find you.
So I stay really well connected with a lot of my candidates. Obviously, you can tell that I do more than a typical recruiter. And I really try to share whenever one of my candidates lands, whether I place them there or not. Because in a market like this, it can feel so hard and feel like no one's hiring.
Mhm.
So many people are hiring. Companies still need talent. There are roles out there. You just have to do more work than you would have had to do in 2021 and 2022. But that's probably good because then you know it's a fit or not a fit. They're not just hiring you because you're a warm body that can do the job, right? So don't sit back and wait. Like this is not tennis. Think foosball maybe. Like I can control this game a bit more than I think, right? Have some good follow-up work, do the legwork, do what it takes to land, and don't bemoan and grudge. And like the worst thing about the job search is how hard it is on you. But if you let that deflate you and then stop doing anything and internalize and start sitting at home and not doing anything and not going out, you're never going to land. That's when the job search is going to take the longest. So be out there, be active, be meeting people, be having conversations, get out of your funk by going for a walk, that type of thing. Like remember that people are landing, but the ones that are landing are doing something about it. They're not just waiting. And what I specialize in, I'm an HR recruiter in Southeast Wisconsin. So I specialize in primarily HR, all levels. But in a market like this, we have to be flexible. So I just placed a COO. I'm working on a CFO search right now. I'm working for a general manager for like water replace, not like a water remediation company that I just talked to them today. So I'm a lot more flexible in what I do. And I like to service candidates and clients just to help them make that connection match.
Awesome. And if people want to reach out, is LinkedIn the best place to find you? Where should people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is a great resource for that. Yeah.
Good, good. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Kristin. I learned a ton. I think I could talk to you and ask you questions for 5 hours and probably still want more, because these topics are fascinating to me. So
Me
that
too.
probably means I'm in the right field, as are you, for what we're doing.
Yeah.
I know most of our job seekers listening right now are like, I hope I never have to talk about these topics again.
Right?
This isn't their wheelhouse. So I really appreciate your time and just thank you. And please, if anyone has questions, especially if they're in the HR Southeast Wisconsin, definitely get in touch with Kristin. I've worked with a lot of folks that have a lot of great things to say about her. And so yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.